Society. James A. Laureate needed to find answers to some fundamental errors in translating Quechua in the Cuzco area of Peru. Following Harris' 1952 publications, he worked over the meaning and placement of each word in a collection of Quechua legends with a native speaker of Quechua and was able to formulate discourse rules that transcended the simple sentence structure. He then applied the process to Shipibo, another language of eastern Peru. He taught the theory at the Summer Institute of Linguistics in Norman, Oklahoma, in the summers of 1956 and 1957 and entered the University of Pennsylvania to study with Harris in the interim year. He tried to publish a paper, Shipibo Paragraph Structure, but it was delayed until 1970. Laureate and Hollenbach 1970. In the meantime, Kenneth Lee Pike, a professor at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, taught the theory, and one of his students, Robert E. Longacre, developed it in his writings. Harris' methodology disclosing the correlation of form with meaning was developed into a system for the computer-aided analysis of natural language by a team led by Naomi Sager at NYU, which has been applied to a number of sub-language domains, most notably to medical information. The software for the medical language processor is publicly available on SourceForge in the humanities in the late 1960s and 1970s, and, without reference to this prior work, a variety of other approaches to a new cross-discipline of DA began to develop in most of the humanities and social sciences concurrently with, and related to, other disciplines, such as semiotics, psycholinguistics, sociolinguistics, and pragmatics. Many of these approaches, especially those influenced by the social sciences, favor a more dynamic study of oral talk and interaction. An example is conversational analysis, which was influenced by the sociologist Harold Garfinkel, the founder of ethnomethodology. Foucaultian Europe. Michel Foucault became one of the key theorists of the subject, especially of discourse, and wrote The Archaeology of Knowledge. In this context, the term discourse no longer refers to formal linguistic aspects but to institutionalized patterns of knowledge that become manifest in disciplinary structures and operate by the connection of knowledge and power. Since the 1970s, Foucault's works have had an increasing impact, especially on discourse analysis in the social sciences. Thus, in modern European social sciences, one can find a wide range of different approaches working with Foucault's definition of discourse and his theoretical concepts. Apart from the original context in France, there is, at least since 2005, a broad discussion on socio-scientific discourse analysis in Germany. Here, for example, the sociologist Rainer Keller developed his widely recognized sociology of knowledge approach to discourse, SCAD, following the sociology of knowledge by Peter L. Berger and Thomas Lugman. Keller argues that our sense of reality in everyday life, and thus the meaning of every object, actions and events, are the product of a permanent, routinized interaction. In this context, SCAD has been developed as a scientific perspective that is able to understand the processes of the social construction of reality on all levels of social life by combining Michel Foucault's theories of discourse and power with the theory of knowledge by Berger, Luckman, whereas the latter primarily focus on the constitution and stabilization of knowledge on the level of interaction. Foucault's perspective concentrates on institutional contexts of the production and integration of knowledge, where the subject mainly appears to be determined by knowledge and power. Therefore, the sociology of knowledge approach to discourse can also be seen as an approach to deal with the vividly discussed micro-macro problem in sociology. Perspectives. The following are some of the specific theoretical perspectives and analytical approaches used in linguistic discourse analysis, applied linguistics, an interdisciplinary perspective on linguistic analysis, cognitive neuroscience of discourse comprehension, cognitive psychology, studying studying the production and comprehension of discourse, conversation, analysis, critical discourse analysis, discursive psychology, emergent grammar, ethnography of communication, functional grammar, interactional sociolinguistics, mediated stylistics, pragmatics, response-based therapy, counseling, rhetoric, stylistics, linguistics, sublanguage analysis, tagmemics, text linguistics, variation analysis. Although these approaches emphasize different aspects of language use, they all view language as social interaction and are concerned with the social contexts in which discourse is embedded. Often a distinction is made between local structures of discourse, such as relations among sentences, propositions, and terms, and global structures, such as overall topics and the schematic organization of discourses and conversations. For instance, many types of discourse begin with some kind of global summary in titles, headlines, leads, abstracts, and so on. A problem for the discourse analyst is to decide when a particular feature is relevant to the specification is required. A question many linguists ask is, are there general principles which will determine the relevance or nature of the specification? Topics of interest. Topics of discourse analysis include the various levels or dimensions of discourse, such as sounds, intonation, etc., gestures, syntax, the lexicon, style, rhetoric, meanings, speech acts, moves, strategies, turns, and other aspects of interaction. Genres of discourse. Various types of discourse in politics, the media, education, science, business, etc. The relations between discourse and the emergence of syntactic structure. The relations between text, discourse, and context. The relations between discourse and power. The relations between discourse and interaction. The relations between discourse and cognition and memory. Prominent academic: Jean Blama, Ton Van Dyke, Michelle Foucault, Ida E. Hamilton, Barbara Johnstones, and Free McConey, Honathan Potter, Deborah Schifrin, Deborah Tannen, Margaret Wetherill, Ruth Wodak. Political discourse. Political discourse analysis is a field of discourse analysis which focuses on discourse in political forums, such as debates, speeches, and hearings, as the phenomenon of interest. Policy analysis requires discourse analysis to be effective from the post-positivist perspective. Political discourse is the formal exchange of reason, views as to which of several alternative courses of action should be taken to solve a societal problem. An example of an analysis of political discourse is Rafi's 2016 examination into speech acts surrounding the justification of the legislative processes concerning the Australian federal government's intervening in the Northern Territory Aboriginal communities. The intervention was a hasty reaction to a social problem. Through this analysis, Rafi established that there was, in fact, an unwillingness to respond on behalf of the government, and the intervention was, in fact, no more than another attempt to control the indigenous population. However, due to the political rhetoric used, this was largely unidentified. Corporate discourse. Corporate discourse can be broadly defined as the language used by corporations. It encompasses a set of messages that a corporation sends out to the world, the general public, the customers and other corporations, and the messages it uses to communicate within its own structures, the employees and other stakeholders. Comparative linguistics. Comparative linguistics, originally comparative philology, is a branch of historical linguistics that is concerned with comparing languages to establish their historical relatedness. Genetic relatedness implies a common origin or proto-language, and comparative linguistics aims to construct language families, to reconstruct proto-languages, and specify the changes that have resulted in the documented languages, to maintain a clear distinction between attested and reconstructed forms. Comparative linguists prefix an asterisk to any form that is not found in surviving texts. A number of methods for carrying out language classification have been developed, ranging from simple inspection to computer computerized hypothesis testing. Such methods have gone through a long process of development. Methods. The fundamental technique of comparative linguistics is to compare phonological systems, morphological systems, syntax and the lexicon of two or more languages, using techniques such as the comparative method. In principle, every difference between two related languages should be explicable to a high degree of plausibility, and systematic changes, for example, in phonological or morphological systems, are expected to be highly regular, i.e. consistent. In practice, the comparison may be more restricted, e.g. just to the lexicon. In some methods it may be possible to reconstruct an earlier proto-language, although the proto-languages reconstructed by the comparative method are hypothetical. A reconstruction may have predictive power. The most notable example of this is Saussure's proposal that the Indo-European consonant system contained laryngeals, a type of consonant attested in no Indo-European language known at the time. The hypothesis was vindicated with the discovery of Hittite, which proved to have exactly the consonants Saussure had hypothesized. In the environments he had predicted, where languages are derived from a very distant ancestor and are thus more distantly related, the comparative method becomes impracticable. In particular, attempting to relate to reconstructed proto-languages by the comparative method has not generally produced results that have met with wide acceptance. The method has also not been very good at unambiguously identifying subfamilies, and different scholars have produced conflicting results. For example, in Indo-European, a number of methods based on statistical analysis of vocabulary have been developed to try and overcome this limitation, such as lexicostatistics and mass comparison. The former uses lexical cognates like the comparative method, but the latter uses only lexical similarity. The theoretical basis of such methods is that vocabulary items can be matched without a detailed language reconstruction, and that comparing enough vocabulary items will negate individual inaccuracies. Thus, they can be used to determine relatedness, but not to determine the proto-language history. The earliest method